Mahmoud Khalil now, and then I'll get back to the G stuff in a second, okay? Because I think it's time to talk about it. So earlier today, I mean, I knew that the decision was going to come down today from the Louisiana judge, who demanded earlier this week that the American government at least offer any evidence as to why Mahmoud Khalil is deportable. She even went as far as to say that if there's no evidence on my table as to why Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University student, who is a green card recipient, whose wife is an American citizen, who's 8 months pregnant, well, that Mahmoud Khalil is deportable if the government doesn't give any details as to why, any evidence as to why he can be deported from this country. She's going to drop the case. But it turns out that it doesn't take much. It didn't take much for this judge to actually find evidence because the American government sent a memo. I read the memo yesterday. The memo actually had very little details and exclusively featured vague generalizations, no evidence whatsoever, no hard evidence whatsoever as to why a person's green card can be revoked other than the feelings of the State Department. Today, the Louisiana judge made a decision that Mahmoud Khalil is indeed deportable.
With breaking news, a few moments ago, a U.S. immigration judge has ruled that the Trump administration's deportation case against pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil can move forward. Well, we can speak with Shihab Bratunzi, who is live for us outside the Immigration Detention Center in Jena, Louisiana. Now, this has just happened, Shihab. So the judge has ruled that the deportation case can go ahead.
Mahmoud Khalil is removable, in the opinion of the judge. She said that the letter that the Secretary of State...
Due process is dead today officially? No. I want you to understand the wrongdoings that took place today and how important of a boundary this was that the Louisiana judge basically broke. But there's obviously still an opportunity to contest this deportation. Okay? There is still a bunch of things that are taking place, and I'll describe it to you in a second. Let's just continue.
To the court, detailing the reasons for the removal were reasonable. The letter Secretary of State explaining the reason is reasonable. The DHS, so the Department of Homeland Security, has met its burden, she said. However, Khalil is open to a relief application on April the 23rd. And there was a discussion of whether he be deported to Syria or Algeria. So these are the notes, the little clips that we have. No electronic.
It's also a sign of how insane the times have gotten that I had a sigh of relief for a brief moment that he could be deportable to Syria or Algeria as opposed to El Salvador. That's how the situation is. That the American government, by the way, still could technically decide to deport him to CCOT instead. Like, think about how insane that is. Think about how much the needle of cruelty has moved in that direction, where when I heard that he was deportable to Algeria or Syria, I thought, well, at least it's not El Salvador, where seemingly there's no mechanism of extracting someone after wrongdoing has been found by the administration. This is how horrifying America has become. And the saddest part of this, aside from the sheer cruelty, is the fact that many Americans are completely oblivious to it, and those who are familiar with the matter, unironically, are in favor of it. And yes, you aren't wrong. Mahmoud's case is supposed to be heard in New Jersey. Okay, here, I'll just describe it. Here's Steve Vladeck. He says, before folks overreact to the headlines about the judge's ruling in the Khalil case, please note that 1, it was an immigration judge, not a federal district court, and 2, the immigration judge had no power to consider Khalil's constitutional objections. This particular decision was fait accompli. Khalil can still raise his constitutional arguments both in his habeas petition, still pending in a federal court in New Jersey, and once he is able to challenge the immigration judge's ruling in the Fifth Circuit. It sucks that he can't raise them before the IJ, the immigration judge, but that's unfortunately not unusual. So the fait accompli Sorry. What's the evidence the judge deemed convincing, though? It was, and I'm not even joking when I say this, it was a fucking memo that basically said, Mahmoud... Oh, my God. Fiona! Fuck. Jesus Christ, dude. This dog is going crazy. I don't know. Immigration judge is still an agency decision, not an actual Article 3 court decision. Can still appeal for due process. Immigration judges are a lottery system. Some of them are just on crack. Anyway,
devices were allowed in the courtroom. Khalil, we're told, was calm throughout the proceedings, and he did address the court. He said nothing is more important than due process and fundamental fairness. Neither of these principles were present. This is why the Trump administration sent me to this court thousands of miles from my family. So, this is all hinging on a letter that the Secretary of State, Mark...
Does anyone have the memo? We looked at it yesterday. Does anyone have the memo? A 2-page letter that admits Khalil's conduct is not unlawful, but says his beliefs undermine core American interests. Yeah. Here. There is the actual... Someone had a screen grab of the actual memo that they sent. You were supposed to explain what the evidence was in court. Yeah. We looked at it yesterday. Here. It's ridiculous. The memo, signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, states that while Khalil's activities were otherwise lawful, his presence would undermine U.S. policy to combat anti-Semitism around the world and in the United States, in addition to the efforts to protect Jewish students from harassment and violence in the United States. Condoning anti-Semitic conduct and disruptive protests in the United States would severely undermine that significant foreign policy objective. That's it. That's literally it. I am writing to inform you that upon notification from the Department of Homeland Security's Homeland Security Investigations on March 7th, I've determined that this redacted person and Mahmoud Khalil, both U.S. lawful permanent residents, are deportable aliens under INA Section 237. I understand that ICE now intends to initiate removal charges against them based on assurances from DHS, ICE, and HSI. Under INA Section 237, an alien is deportable from the United States if the Secretary of State has reasonable ground to believe that the alien's presence or activities in the United States would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. For cases in which the basis for this determination is the alien's past, current, or expected beliefs, statements, or associations that are otherwise lawful, the Secretary of State must personally determine that the alien's presence or activities would compromise a compelling U.S. foreign policy asset. It's just vibes. They also openly recognize that this person is otherwise a lawful, like there is no misconduct. Okay? He has engaged in an otherwise lawful manner, but the opinion of the Secretary of State is that he is dangerous and therefore deportable. Do you understand how insane that is? Just thought crimes. So Judge Jamie Commons had ordered the U.S. government to produce evidence against Mahmoud Khalil ahead of a hearing on Friday to decide whether the government can continue detaining him. During the earlier claims by the DHS spokesperson, Trisha McClellan, said that Khalil's activities were aligned to Hamas. The government has not provided any evidence to support this accusation and has made no reference to the group in its most recent filing. Khalil's attorneys, Mark Vanderhoot and Johnny Sinotis, stated, after a month of hiding the ball since Mahmoud's late-night unjust arrest in New York and taking him away to a remote detention center in Louisiana, immigration authorities have finally admitted that they have no case whatsoever against him. There's not a single shred of proof that Mahmoud's presence in America posed any threat, the attorneys added in their statement. There's also another thing that they had sent. There was a memo that was sent to the judge's office yesterday, and the memo basically said that Mahmoud and this other person were involved in protests. That's it. And the protests were scary for Jewish students. That's it. That was the evidence in the memo. Here. Information provided, like, I'm not even joking. Like, that is literally the memo. Information provided by the DHS, ICE, HSI regarding the participation and roles of Redacted and Khalil in anti-Semitic protests and disruptive activities which fosters a hostile environment for Jewish students in the United States. My determination is based on citations for unlawful activity during these protests. The public actions and continued presence of the Redacted and Khalil in the United States undermine U.S. policy to combat anti-Semitism around the world. They're saying that these people are deportable because not that they like, oh, that's only for the redacted person, not Khalil. Oh, I misunderstood. No, it says and Khalil. No, this is for both of them. That's only for the redacted person, by the way, not Khalil. The citations for unlawful activity don't even apply to Khalil. No, it says for both of them. They're stating, no. You have to understand something. They're saying they're saying that the protests had unlawful activity. They do not say what that unlawful activity is. There's no evidence for said unlawful activity. And also beyond that, there's no direct evidence for either the redacted person or Mahmoud Khalil engaging in the unlawful activity. They're simply saying that the determination is alleged unlawful activity that they vaguely tie back to these two people. You're missing my point. I agree, but I'm saying this letter specifically doesn't implicate Khalil in unlawful activity. It only implicates him in the protests themselves. Yes. You're misunderstanding. The blurred area chat is confusing. Seems like a number of citations in the charge they're accusing him of. No. The point I'm making here is that even for the redacted person, there is no evidence for unlawful activity directly. There might be, but there's none here. It's just unlawful activity exists, okay? There's no evidence for that either. But let's say there is unlawful activity that has taken place in these protests. That's not too difficult to determine. You can say someone kicked over a trash can, right? You can say someone kicked over a trash can. That's unlawful activity. That's causing a disturbance, whatever. They didn't even do that. And even if they were to do that, they did not point it directly at either of these people. They did not say Mahmoud Khalil kicked over a trash can or the redacted person kicked over a trash can. They're simply saying trash cans were kicked over. They're not even saying that, but let's say that they did say that, okay? That they are somehow responsible for it. This is not how this works. You have to at least develop a pattern. You have to, at the very least, develop a pattern of behavior or show proof that that this isn't just guilt by proximity or guilt by association, but a cause and effect, a causal factor and an effect of how Khalil was determined to get someone else to kick that trash can. There is no crime that has been committed, which is precisely the reason why, especially for something that is as crazy as like revoking the green card of a otherwise documented non-citizen. Okay, not even a non-citizen at that point. It's like the final stage of becoming a full-blown naturalized U.S. citizen. You have a green card. The fact that they don't even show any evidence whatsoever, let alone evidence that it would be consistent with something eligible for deportation, is insane. My determination for a redacted person is also based on unknown citations for unlawful activity during these protests. What I'm saying is, if they believe this applied to Khalil as well, they would have said as much, but they specifically left Khalil out of this particular statement. Is also based on citations. Oh, okay. But yeah, all right. This is a separate sentence. You're right. The public actions and continued presence of redacted and Khalil in the United States undermine U.S. policy. Okay, you're right. I was wrong. Megaphonics is right. I was wrong. They're not even making it. They're not even making a statement for both the redacted person and Khalil based on citations for unlawful activity in these protests. But they are making a determination for the redacted person for citations for unlawful activity during these protests. Even then, though, there is no evidence for unlawful activity, and this leaves it up to determine. This is so vague in and of itself. This is so unimaginably vague in and of itself to say that there was unlawful activity that took place in these protests and this person may have contributed to it. Citations or a green card holder can get deported for a speeding ticket? Under normal circumstances, of course not. In this situation, they are technically, for Mahmoud Khalil specifically, they're saying you don't even need to do anything unlawful. This right here is the State Department stating that the revocation of someone's green card can be done over nothing unlawful at all, but simply the vibes of the State Department. Because I said so. And they can't even find anything to associate him with anyway. Not even littering. They're not even choosing. Even if they could find, a charge for jaywalking, they're not even looking for it. Because The determination being based on those grounds alone is the initiative. That they got locked into this. They got locked into this because I suspect that they got locked into this because they were operating with really bad info. Like they just thought that he was, as they said initially, a person on a student visa, where it's still ridiculous. It's still unacceptable to do this. But the revocation of a visa, a revocation of a student visa in comparison to a green card, is going to be somewhat of a lower standard, right? Even though they shouldn't be able to do this for someone, if Mahmoud Khalil was on a student visa, they still should not have been able to do this. But the very fact that he's also a green card holder, married to an American citizen who's, pregnant, 8 months pregnant, like this is a very, very sympathetic figure. And they ran with it regardless because they were just locked in. They didn't just go, all right, we'll burn this case and then we'll move on to the next one where we can make a more compelling argument as to why this person should be deported. Because eventually their goal was to do this anyway. And I think eventually their goal is not just to stay on deportations for green card holders for the crime of hurting Israel's feelings. I think their goal is to denaturalize citizens as well. That's the next step. If you were naturalized in the last 5 years, they're going to try and denaturalize you and then move on. And then what's that sound? It's my dad. He's making food for me. Okay. Sorry. I know there's a noise in the background. Press for evidence against Mahmoud Khalil. Government cites its power to deport people for beliefs. And they also stated that like illegal ideas that cross the border are offenses. And then they deleted it after everyone fucking yelled at them and made fun of them. Ross Barkin says, I'm genuinely curious if I'm allowed to now write essays and opinion pieces critical of the Israeli government, or Marco Rubio will try to find a way to arrest or remove me from the U.S. I am a citizen. I doubt this happens, but that's where we are now. The Bush war and terror violated civil liberties in terrible ways, but through the insanity, there was a dark logic. 9/11 happened, and America had to be protected. Trump deporting pro-Palestinian protesters has no logic. It's just insidious and a violation of the First Amendment. The reality of the matter is that without the post 9/11 destruction of American civil liberties, Donald Trump would not be able to do this. Without the Bush administration not rewriting the rules and returning to a sense of normalcy, we would not be at the stage where Donald Trump can do this. Same goes for Joe Biden as well. So all of the previous administrations played a role in where we got. I think it'll get worse if you listen to them talk about it. They feel like they're getting rid of them and making someone else problem. If you're a citizen who would stand against Trump, you're America's problem. Yes, this is fascism through and through. And I'm trying to explain this to Americans who don't comprehend it because they think like, even in their minds, they go, well, I'm white, or white people won't get harmed in this process. No, they will. Anyone and everyone that speaks out against this administration will eventually be in the crosshairs. Wake the fuck up. The most insane part of this that I suspect is the insidious nature of Trump's agenda is not obviously because they care about anti-Semitism. Let's be fucking real. Donald Trump dined with Nick Fuentes, okay, and Kanye West. Donald Trump has rabid anti-Semites in the administration. They do not care about anti-Semitism, okay? But they recognize that they want to undermine the First Amendment. And the most effective way of eroding constitutional protections for free speech, free association, free assembly, free press is by tackling an issue that actually does have institutional muscle. Anti-Semitism is, as it stands, not only socially unacceptable, but institutionally not permissible either, for the time being. That is surely changing. But for the time being, there are a lot of Jewish advocacy groups and a lot of pro-Israeli advocacy groups that maintain themselves as that have a lot of institutional muscle to flex. And for that reason, there's a lot of appetite for some of these advocacy groups to engage in these kinds of actions. So the Trump administration is simply using anti-Semitism, which is not even real anti-Semitism, but instead anti-Israel sentiment, by the way. Okay? They're using anti-Israel sentiment as a starting point as a way to open the door for whatever the fuck they want to prosecute down the line. Because once constitutional protections are undermined, once the First Amendment is gone, they can do that to anyone and everyone, especially when it's paired up with the reality that due process is gone. Once due process for non-citizens is gone, well, you don't have due process. How are we going to figure out if you are a citizen or not to begin with? Eric Prince is lobbying Trump on a plan to vastly expand the U.S. operations to detain migrants in El Salvador's notorious C-COP prison, including relocating thousands currently held in the United States and designating a part of the jail as U.S. territory. The irony here, of course, is that this is being done by the free speech president, you know, under the banner of free speech. The most egregious violation of the First Amendment in American history. And here it is. Immigration judge finds that Columbia University activist Mahmoud Khalil can be deported as a national security risk. An immigration judge in Louisiana found Friday during a hearing over the legality of deporting the activists who participated in the pro-Palestinian demonstrations. The government's contention that Khalil's presence in the United States posed a potentially serious foreign policy consequences was enough to satisfy the requirement for his deportation. Immigration judge Jamie E. Coleman said at the conclusion of a hearing in Jena. Coleman said that the government had established by clear and convincing evidence that he is removable. They did not, by the way. This is the judge's own personal decision. They very clearly did not. I showed you the evidence that they had, which directly contradicts what this person is saying. They openly admit that this person did not engage in any sort of unlawful misconduct, but simply was at the whims, at the mercy of the Secretary of State that singled him out. Lawyers for Khalil said they plan to keep fighting. The judge gave them until April 23rd to seek a waiver. Meanwhile, a federal judge in New Jersey temporarily barred Khalil's deportation. Addressing the judge at the end of the hearing, Khalil mentioned that she said at a hearing earlier in the week that there's nothing more important to this court than due process rights and fundamental fairness. Clearly, what we witnessed today, neither of these principles were present today or in this whole process, he added. His lawyer, Mark Vanderhout, also criticized the hearing's fairness. Today, we saw our worst fears play out. Mahmoud was subject to a charade of due process, a flagrant violation of his rights in a fair hearing, and a weaponization of immigration law to suppress dissent. Khalil, a legal U.S. resident, was detained by federal immigration agents on March 8th in the lobby of his university-owned apartment, the first arrest under President Donald Trump's promised crackdown on students who joined campus protests against the war in Gaza. Within a day, he was flown across the country and taken to an immigration detention center in Jena, thousands of miles from his attorneys and wife, a U.S. citizen who is due to give birth soon. Khalil's lawyers have challenged the legality of his detention, saying the Trump administration is trying to crack down on free speech protected by the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has cited a rarely used statute to justify Khalil's deportation, which gives him the power to deport those who pose potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. At Friday's hearing, Vanderhout told the judge that the government's submissions to court to prove to attempt to deport his client has nothing to do with foreign policy. Earlier this week, Coleman challenged the government to share proof that Khalil should be expelled from the country for his role in campus protests against Israel and the war in Gaza. She said if evidence does not support his removal, she would terminate the case on Friday. On Friday, Justice Department attorneys said in papers filed in federal court in Newark, New Jersey, that Coleman would not have the authority to immediately free Khalil. They said an immigration judge could determine if Khalil is subject to deportation, then conduct a bail hearing afterwards if it's found that he is not. Khalil isn't accused of breaking any laws during the protests at Columbia. Yeah, clear and convincing evidence is just below reasonable doubt and just above preponderance of evidence, 51% proven. What you showed doesn't even rise to preponderance, not even close. Exactly, but a fucking rabid, sociopathic, bloodthirsty judge can just decide, again, to make that claim, to say, no, this is enough evidence for me. Bad vibes is enough evidence for me. I guess the cowardly way out of that assessment would be to say, well, I am in no position to determine whether or not the Marco Rubio assessment is wrong. I guess that's the legal defense for this judge, to say, well, that's the Secretary of State. The law is the law. I cannot make an additional determination and be the precedent-setting judge here that potentially plays a role in undermining the power of the State Department. But I don't even think that they're thinking about it like that. I think that they just were, this was specifically sent to this judge for the reasons that she would inevitably do this. The government, however, has said non-citizens who participate in such demonstrations should be expelled from the country for expressing views that the administration considers to be anti-Semitic or pro-Hamas, referring to the Palestinian militant group that attacked Israel October 7th. Khalil, a 30-year-old international affairs graduate student, had served as a negotiator and a spokesperson for student activists at Columbia University who took over campus lawn last spring to protest Israel's military campaign in Gaza. The university brought police in to dismantle the encampment after a small group of protesters seized an administration building. Khalil is not accused of participating in the building occupation and wasn't among the people arrested in connection with the demonstrations. But images of his maskless face at protests, along with his willingness to share his name with reporters, have made him an object of scorn among those who saw the protesters and their demands as anti-Semitic. Oh, shit. I guess their fucking delusions are what matters here. As long as the State Department decides that people's personal delusions and fears trump over the First Amendment protections afforded to every single citizen and non-citizen alike on U.S. soil. What the fuck? This won't survive on appeal either to the District Court or the Fifth Circuit. If this is truly the law, then it is unconstitutional as applied because it permits arbitrary and unjustified serious action against Americans. Yes. Well, not American legal permanent residents. That's the extent of it, but not necessarily American citizens, I guess, which then creates this two-tier system where American citizens have more rights under the Constitution. It's unconstitutional because the Constitution has very clearly determined up until this very moment that citizens and non-citizens alike, documented, undocumented, does not matter. As long as they are on U.S. soil, okay, they have the same rights to due process, and they are still very much protected by the First Amendment. The only area where this does not apply is when you're at the border. Okay? That's it. The only area where this does not apply is at the fucking border before you step foot into the United States of America. This is not just an American principle, mind you. This unironically is a fundamental of international human rights. What we're talking about here is quite literally one of the underpinnings of liberal democracy that basically goes all the way back to fucking Magna Carta. Like the due process and this are what made the world what it is today. It's one of the things that we point to when talking about how we don't have any fucking monarchs anymore and how enlightened we are, how evolved we are in comparison to what things used to look like, what governance used to look like. I mean, we had a court system under fucking kings. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, this is insane. It's worse than fucking monarchs somehow. And we're doing all of that for Israel, a foreign country. It is so psychotic. It is so monstrous. Here are Mahmoud Khalil's words after the hearing. At the end of the hearing, Mahmoud Khalil asked to address the court saying, "I would like to quote what you said last time, that there's nothing that's more important to this court than due process rights and fundamental fairness. Clearly, what we witnessed today, neither of those principles were present today or in this whole process. This is exactly why the Trump administration has sent me to this court, 1,000 miles away from my family. I just hope that the urgency that you deemed fit for me are afforded to the hundreds of others who have been here without hearing for months." Yeah. So make no mistake, yes, the fight is not over for Mahmoud Khalil. He will appeal and go to a federal court. The immigration judge is an employee of the very people trying to deport him. The system is broken. But immigration judges, yes, are employees of the executive branch, not the judiciary, and often approve the Homeland Security Department's deportation efforts. It would be unusual for such a judge serving the U.S. Attorney General to grapple with the constitutional questions raised by Mr. Khalil's case. She would also run the risk of being fired by an administration that has targeted dissenters. No, not for Israel, under the pretense for being for Israel. This is all Donald Trump and the expansion of his powers. Yes, this is true. And this, I do agree with that statement, by the way. As it stands, it is ostensibly for Israel, but Israel is just, and it's or ostensibly for anti-Semitism, but it's actually for Israel. But even then, it's not just for Israel. It is actually to just violate and shred the fucking First Amendment. That's all this is about. Because the pro-Israeli lobby and pro-Israeli advocacy groups that masquerade as Jewish advocacy groups have a lot of institutional muscle to flex. So they're simply using that institutional muscle because there's no other group in the United States of America as far as like personal advocacy groups that have that same level of institutional muscle. So they're just simply using this as a opportunity to open up the floodgates against the First Amendment. This is precisely the reason why in our history, we have already violated the First Amendment on numerous occasions. Come on, dude. We've already violated the First Amendment on numerous occasions for Israel to begin with. Anti-BDS laws in 37 states is a clear-cut definitional example of said violation. Do you see the admin doing this as a starting point to shred the First Amendment and to later move to something bigger? Or do you think they're only focused on anti-Israel non-citizens? No, I don't think that they're going to stay only focused on anti-Israel non-citizens. I think that they're going to go from anti-Israel to like other erroneous shit like anti-Christian sentiment could be another entry point. You know what I mean? And eventually they will go after citizens as well and turn them into non-citizens, either by way of eroding due process and therefore have no mechanism to figure out whether someone is a citizen or not. I just told you so. But we're simply going to be operating on the whims of whoever the fuck they've chosen. But that is what I think will happen. They will probably, my suspicion is that they will probably start making assertions as to why it's important to denaturalize people as well. Yeah, anti-Christian policy. Yeah, President Donald Trump, and I've stopped all government censorship and brought back free speech in America. State tells employees to report on one another for anti-Christian bias. Clean water, equity, microplastics, in other words, are banned in leaked USDA memo. Obviously, private groups work to identify and report student protests for possible deportation. Yeah, anti-Trump sentiment is another one. Anti-American sentiment could be another one. Anti-capitalist sentiment will probably be another one as well. It's just Nazi shit. So eventually we will do it. As I've stated already, the goals and the ambitions of this administration to implement fascist policies is endless. And it seems like there is no counter mechanism to push back against it, to fight back against it regardless. Bringing this back, don't send me fucking Yair Rosenberg's article, dude. Trump's anti-Semitism agenda isn't about the Jews. I wrote about how the president and his allies. Yeah, fuck this guy, okay? Fuck Yair Rosenberg, for the record. People that have had endless appetite for undermining and screaming about fucking pro-Palestinian protests, turning around now when push comes to shove and being like, well, don't blame the Jews for this, because they recognize that a lot of people will inevitably blame the Jews for this. The reaping part is fine, but the sowing part I don't really fucking like. Or sorry, the sowing part is fine, but the reaping part I do not like. Yeah, it was awesome when I made the bed, but now I don't want to lie in it. It looks like he's arriving at the right point here, but I agree it's more of a coming from you, this is rich moment. Yeah, exactly. And for the record, you'll see more of this. You see the ADL, the fucking ADL has the audacity to also distance themselves from the likes of Beitar. This happened a couple weeks prior. I covered it, okay? The ADL. It's insane to me that the ADL has any way of removing themselves from this deportation regime. Richie Torres backing down from this. Fiona